Hello, my giant, swirling, pig-head-shaped friends. Arlo here, and today we're reviewing Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Part prequel, part sequel, part spin-off. It's the game that literally no one saw coming, yet somehow also feels like it was inevitable. It also marks something of a new foray into continuous storytelling for the series, so suffice it to say, it had a lot to live up to when it hit the scene. So now the question is it a breath of fresh air, or an absolute catastrophe? Got you there. Let's find out, whoosh! Hyrule Warriors is hard for me to say. Hyrule Warriors. I don't really know why. I just don't quite know where to put the emphasis, and it doesn't come out of my mouth right. Hyrule Warriors. Fortunately, this time around, I've got a subtitle to cling to, which makes things a lot easier. Age of Calamity is, of course, something of a continuation of the original Hyrule Warriors, though this time with a canonical story set 100 years before the events of Breath of the Wild. And in case I haven't said it enough times in other videos on the topic, I think this is a genius idea. The war against Calamity Ganon was very big and involved a lot of people, and that's not a story you'd be able to clearly communicate through Link running around solving puzzles and collecting spiritual doodads from temples. The Warriors gameplay provides an opportunity to live these battles exactly as they would have been. And speaking of that gameplay, let's start there. Age of Calamity plays very similarly to its predecessor, as you would expect. You've got quick attacks and strong attacks, and instead of a more complicated combo system where you alternate between them and combine them with other moves, here your combo is performed when you do a strong attack after a certain number of quick ones. Basically, you mash Y, then you'll perform a different combo depending on when you hit X in the sequence. The concept is a little new to me, and sometimes I still have trouble pulling off the exact combo I want, but overall, it's a pretty intuitive system. It's all about practice and feel, and it allows you to pull off combos instinctively while keeping most of your attention on your enemy and other actions. Whenever an enemy is in a vulnerable state, such as at the end of a big attack, its weak point gauge shows up. Chip this all the way down to nothing, and you get to perform a special attack. You can also perform special attacks by spending chunks from your special gauge, which you fill up through combat. All standard stuff so far, but one really excellent addition is the Flurry Rush from Breath of the Wild. Here it works just as it did in the source material. If you dodge an attack right at the last second, time slows down and you get to unload on your enemy. This is especially good for breaking weak point gauges. It's tricky to pull off and sometimes feels a little inconsistent or even random, which is funny because that's exactly how it felt in Breath of the Wild. Nice little bit of authenticity there. But it's also immensely rewarding and of course very empowering. Basically every attack can be perfectly dodged if you're quick enough, so the desire to learn attacks and perfect your timing runs through the entire experience. It's a relatively small change, but I feel like it makes the game significantly more fun than the first Hyrule Warriors. Another change is how the game handles items. The first game had your basic Zelda items, which could be used against specific enemies during specific attacks, and also as a means to overcome obstacles on the map. I did enjoy the Zelda-ness of the system, though it did feel a little tacked on at times. In Age of Calamity, however, the whole system has been refined and streamlined. Right from the start, every character has access to the Sheikah slate runes. You Magneto, you Freezy-Doo, you Zappo bombs, and you hold it right there. At first I thought it was strange to give these powers to every character instead of just Zelda, but now I see how beneficial the system is. It's no longer used to progress on the map. It's all about battle now. And using these runes is a very basic, common element of combat. The devs came up with a lot of very clever uses for them, such as using a block of ice to stop a charging foe, or grabbing the metal weapon someone is throwing and sending it right back at them. You can use these runes whenever you want, and they can be very helpful, but using them at the exact right time will break through an enemy's defenses. It took a while for me to really get the system down, but now it's woven through the gameplay, and instantly reacting to an attack with just the right rune is a lot like a Flurry Rush in that it just makes you feel awesome. Despite the differing genres and overall gameplay styles between the two games, similarity to Breath of the Wild actually runs through even more of the combat than just the runes and Flurry Rush. The game doesn't control like Breath of the Wild, yet the enemies are almost identical. If you've played Breath of the Wild, then you'll know all their weak spots and exactly how to bring them down. Everything from hitting a Hinox in the eye, to climbing on top of a stone talus, to reflecting a Guardian's beam attack back at it with a perfect parry. Familiarity allows you to just jump in and already feel like you've got a good handle on any situation. One of Age of Calamity's biggest strengths is how authentically it recreates the look and feel of Breath of the Wild. If you removed the UI and the zillions of enemies and all that, you'd be hard-pressed to tell the two games apart. The characters in the world have all been carried over and/or faithfully recreated, even down to the exact cell shading and lighting effects. I can only imagine the cutscenes were handled by the original Breath of the Wild team, because you would never know they didn't belong in the base game. All this naturally works wonders to make you feel like you're playing a real Breath of the Wild story. It's great revisiting familiar locales in this new context, and it's fun to see how some of these places were reimagined as self-contained maps. Perhaps predictably, it's particularly fun exploring locations that are only ruins and rubble in Breath of the Wild, such as Hyrule Castle Town. And you want to talk about familiarity? Amidst all this fighting and running around, what else are you doing? Well, what do you do in Breath of the Wild? You collect materials. Monsters drop stuff, you can find stuff in boxes, and there are even Koroks to find on each map. What do you do with all these materials? A whole lot, my friend. This right here is the map. As you can probably tell, it's identical to the map in Breath of the Wild, and even the menus and the sounds are all the same, which gives it a great feeling of authenticity. You'll spend a lot of time on this map, and if you're like me, you'll enjoy it a great deal. That's because this is one place where Age of Calamity actually outshines the game it's based on. Here, there are tons and tons of things to do with your spoils. You can spend rupees to raise the levels of your characters, which comes in very handy. As you play, you accumulate weapons, and in this case, you can fuse them together to make them stronger, which gives you something to do with weapons that would otherwise be worthless. By mixing and matching runes, you can unlock stat boosts and stuff as well, which is a fun way to customize your fighter, even if a small amount. On top of that, the map is overstuffed with quests. Provide a specific amount of specific materials, get a reward. It's one of those silly, somewhat arbitrary, gamey kind of systems, but I absolutely love it. Getting some materials on the field or for completing quests? Feels good. I might need these later. Spending those materials on other quests to unlock features or simply earn other materials to earn in other quests? Terrific! It's a very satisfying feedback loop. In fact, the entire map and all the quests and different systems in place all interact wonderfully and really keep you pushing. Especially considering many of your rewards will be extra hearts and combos and other enhancements for your characters. You can actually use the Sheikah slate to track specific materials, because of course you can, and finding that last item you needed to unlock an extra chunk of your favorite character's special gauge is an exquisite feeling. Even better than the simple mechanics of it though, every quest gives you a little blurb about what's needed and why, followed by a blurb for completion as well. This text is a simple thing, and yet it legitimately helps strengthen the feel of the game and even deepen the lore of the world. A lot of people have expressed a desire to help rebuild Hyrule in Breath of the Wild using gathered materials, myself very much included. And here that dream is realized in a way. The whole game, you're building up an army, you're training your troops, you're aiding in trade between regions. You're solving interpersonal problems. You're just plain making townsfolk happy. You're engrossed in the world and its denizens. And even in addition to just making for a great feedback loop, it just feels great narratively. It's empowering, it's fun. It shows us what Hyrule was like before it was decimated. It tells little stories about characters we don't usually get to spend a lot of time with. I mean, these little quest blurbs reference anything and everything from Breath of the Wild, all the way down to tiny little obscure details. These were made with a lot of love, and they connect the two games almost in a magical way. Then, just to top everything off, you can also earn stuff through challenge missions, which put your characters in all sorts of wacky situations against all sorts of enemies. These give you money and materials and XP and weapons, just like everything else, of course, and getting through them all is no small feat. And between everything, this map provides a very large amount of content to enjoy. It's a lot to chip away at, which means you'll get a lot of mileage out of the game, but it's not overly bloated and convoluted and time-wasting like the adventure mode in the original Hyrule Warriors. I'd say it offers a nice balance of grindiness and just enough content that 100% completion feels like it's actually possible for me. Don't get me wrong though, when I say grindy, I mean it. If Age of Calamity has one major flaw, it's the same flaw that sounds like it's present in every single Warriors game in existence. it's super repetitive. You'll fight the same enemy hundreds, if not thousands of times. You'll find yourself farming rupees and materials if you really want to complete a lot of the map. The scenarios all play out pretty similarly. I could be misremembering my time with the first Hyrule Warriors, but I feel like that game had a bigger emphasis on the strategy element. It's certainly still present here, but I feel like I spend less time defending and capturing keeps than I used to, which is a little disappointing in a way. For the most part, the game is all about that fighting, then the map stuff, then back to the fighting. It's lather, rinse, repeat. This is why I can never blame anyone for disliking these games, even if they have cool Zelda stories attached. If any one part of the experience doesn't click with you, the rest will probably just not work. But if it does click, it clicks pretty darn hard. You find the combat fun enough that you don't mind fighting the same enemies again and again, and in fact, you enjoy learning how to demolish them with savage speed. The satisfaction of taking out dozens of enemies at once doesn't grow old. You just love the in-between RPG-ish map stuff that much. It's all repetitive, but when you're hooked in, you just don't care. There's even something kind of comfortable about it. The great thing about Warriors games is that they work hard to offset that feeling of repetition through character variety. And Age of Calamity is clearly no exception. Every character looks, feels, and controls differently. The gameplay basics don't change, but the specifics are all over the place. Some characters switch between modes, some have charge meters, some are all about performing a certain action with exact timing. And they all use Sheikah slate runes in different ways and with completely different animations, which is a really fun little detail. There are so many characters that you can try them all out and stick with the ones that feel right to you whenever you're given the option. There's certainly a disappointment that comes with picking a new character that you'd love to main and instantly realizing that they just do not mesh with you, but there's also something fun about falling in love with a character you didn't expect. And if you're not into the fancy stuff, Link himself is a terrific, straightforward fighter with a one-handed weapon. Though, even there, you can have some variety if you choose, because two-handers and spears give him completely different movesets. There truly is something for everyone. Adding even more variety to the gameplay are the stages where you get to actually control the 4 divine beasts. Naturally, these sequences are completely different from the base gameplay and have you running around and blasting everything. They're basically just mindless shoot-em-ups. This is where the game's visuals take a serious dive, and the controls are pretty awkward, especially considering each beast controls differently and you've got to relearn the controls every time you switch. I could easily see someone arguing that they're superfluous at best and ultimately drag the game down. But I love them. I love them. I adore them, in fact, because they're just plain cool. I am playing a Zelda game, and I am piloting a giant robotic animal across Hyrule Field using a laser cannon to blast literally thousands of enemies, picking off dozens of Lynels and Wizrobes and Guardians at once. We spent so much time in Breath of the Wild hearing about how cool the champions were, and wondering what piloting a divine beast might actually mean beyond doing one little Ganon blaster attack. Well, this is it. We don't just get to see it, we get to live it! We get to play out these epic battles spanning all of Hyrule! And on the subject of character coolness, this game's got it in spades. Playing as the famous champions is just incredible. What other Zelda game lets you play as a Goron? That doesn't count. Or a Rito. That doesn't count. You know what I'm trying to say. Gerudo, ha! There's one. The point is, these are characters completely independent of Link and his influence. They utilize Hyrule's unique races, which is something I've wanted Nintendo to do more of for ages. Breath of the Wild presented the idea of the champions and left me wanting. But this game gives me everything I was looking for and more. I mean, look at this! Look how epic all of this is! One particular joy is in discovering all the playable characters. It's the feeling Smash games used to give me, where you just don't know who you're gonna unlock until boom, there it is! Some of these surprises are just delightful, and as I said earlier, it's fun trying out every character and seeing how they've been adapted to fight in a Warriors game. Before moving on, I would like to address one criticism I see pretty commonly, and it's about this epicness I'm describing. I've heard it said that these characters shouldn't be quite this good at killing bad guys. It's certainly true that in Breath of the Wild, you might struggle to kill one moblin, and here you're demolishing entire armies without effort. Is this an example of narrative inconsistency? Well, Here's my take. 1, for all we know, these characters were this powerful. Maybe even at the end of Breath of the Wild, Link is still weak from spending so much time in the underwear bath. 2, what if every Zelda game isn't meant to be taken literally, but more as a story being told? That would explain why the games use so many different art styles, and even beyond the meta angle, Age of Calamity could be the story of the champions as told by someone within Breath of the Wild. Surely they would have talked about destroying dozens of baddies with a single blow and pulling off all these cool tricks and stuff. It's a story, it's gotta be fun. 3, even if it is inconsistent, who cares? Look at what is happening on the screen! Are you telling me you want to give this up just so you can say the narrative is absolutely perfectly consistent? The gameplay styles are so different that this kind of change is necessary to keep the fun factor high. This is a war! Defeating lots of enemies is the whole point! And to elaborate more on the coolness factor, we now come to the story. I'm not going to be sharing any spoilers here, and in fact, we've only been showing footage from pretty early in the game. I will, however, be describing what I felt about the experience, which will give you some super vague information about the nature of the story. Basically, I think people who didn't play it won't be spoiled, and people who did will get what I'm saying. If you're super sensitive and don't want to hear even a single thing though, I guess you'll have to skip ahead a bit. I must say, this game is epic. I was hoping that Breath of the Wild 2 would do a better job of scratching my story itch than 1 did, but Age of Calamity has already beaten it to the punch. This is every bit of what I wanted from Breath of the Wild and more. We get to see all the crazy stuff that went down 100 years ago. We get to see the champions and the divine beasts in action. We get to witness how these characters work together, and we even get to see some stuff that was never alluded to in Breath of the Wild, but apparently happened. This is the Breath of the Wild story fleshed out. And more importantly, it's a Zelda story being everything a Zelda story has the potential to be. We have never seen this many characters and watched this many cutscenes in a Zelda game before, and I gotta tell you, I want more of this. And these aren't all cheap little cutscenes either, which was one of my complaints about Breath of the Wild. These are fun and action-packed, and even throw in some twists and turns your way to keep you on the edge of your seat despite the game's prequel status. So between the character reveals, the cutscenes, what we can read on the map, and the sequences that happen through the actual gameplay, what we've got here is one heck of an awesome story. It's not the deepest and most nuanced story in the world or anything, but it's highly enjoyable. And for Zelda, it feels like a big deal. Not every Zelda game ever should have a scope this big, but hey, I'll certainly take it sometimes. The thing about the story though, I love it, but I'm also very conflicted on it. All I'll say is that the story does some things that I did not expect. There are elements of these unexpected things that I actually thought were very fun and prevented the game from being too predictable. One of the game's best moments is one of these unexpected things. But while these things did open up new possibilities, they also held back some of the story's potential. There were things I was personally hoping I'd get to see that I didn't. And perhaps my biggest problem with this unexpected stuff is that it's not very well explained. At the end of the game, I was left scratching my head about some details. I found some clarity in the game's gallery, but not having that info during the campaign hurt my enjoyment a bit. And even now, I've still got some questions. Technically, Breath of the Wild sequel could answer them, I suppose, but I'm not counting on that. Just a few more things to cover before we wrap this up. The music in Age of Calamity is good. I don't have anything in particular to say about it. It's not really my style, but there are some pretty epic tracks in there. Obviously, with a game like this, you get less ambient, nature-y stuff like in Breath of the Wild, and more bombastic, orchestral war music. I do actually have one issue with it, though, and it's that on the map in particular, that 4-note main theme can get old very fast. The other sound design is good. The game uses all the same sound effects from Breath of the Wild, which is cool. I didn't like the voice acting in that game, so for this game, I took the internet's advice to pick the Spanish dub. And I do not regret it one bit.
Pues tengo lo que necesitas. Mi especialidad.
The cheesy English acting breaks the mood for me, but the Spanish performances are terrific. Hearing a language I don't understand makes me less likely to scrutinize each line, and Spanish is simply beautiful and makes every line feel almost poetic. I highly recommend giving it a try if you had problems with the voice acting in the original game. The graphics are basically what I would expect from a game like this. Under controlled circumstances, things look like they did in the source material, and I'm actually impressed by how they were able to fit so many enemies on screen without making them look significantly worse. There are plenty of rough edges here and there though, especially in the Divine Beast sequences, which I mentioned earlier. The game's just a lot faster and has a lot more going on than Breath of the Wild, so they obviously had to make some sacrifices. Overall, the game looks good, though one very large sacrifice that's going to be harder for some people to ignore is the game's performance. Slowdown is a regular occurrence, and depending on what's going on, it can become pretty severe. My favorite character shoots a whole bunch of stuff all over the place with a ton of effects. And when there are a lot of enemies on screen and my attacks are also causing effects when they hit and it's also raining or something, we're talking a couple frames a second at the worst of it. I could easily see this being a deal breaker for some, but for some reason it just doesn't affect me. My frame rate preferences vary from game to game, and in this one, the base frame rate is consistent enough that dips don't bother me. And during those times when I'm pulling off a great big attack and everything slows to a crawl, this is gonna sound incredibly weird, I kinda like it. It's like it's worse the better I perform, so I've been conditioned to find it kinda satisfying when everything slows down. It means I'm taking out a massive number of enemies and doing a massive amount of damage, and I'm so awesome that the game can't even keep up. I know that's not exactly how it works, but for whatever reason, I think it's kind of fun sometimes. And other times, I just don't mind. There have been maybe a couple times when it's gotten in the way of me doing something, but it's just not a big deal overall. In a sense, Age of Calamity is a follow-up to two separate games, and it offers a lot that they don't. It takes Breath of the Wild's story and lifts it up, fills in the gaps, pumps it full of awesome, and maybe even retroactively makes that story better as a result. Then it takes the formula from the first Hyrule Warriors and refines it, polishes it, balances it, and provides an ample amount of content to enjoy without feeling completely overwhelming. The first HW game takes the cake as far as the roster size goes and has a lot of great stuff going for it, which is why I wouldn't make the claim that Age of Calamity replaces it entirely, though I do think Age of Calamity has replaced it for me personally. The first game hooked me real good for a while, but the second I put it down for longer than a day, I was pretty much done. This game, however, keeps calling me back. I tell myself I don't need to get and do everything, and yet I find myself returning to chip away at it again and again and again. I guess I just love the canon story and the gameplay additions that much. It's just a more fun and accessible experience for me, much more digestible. Once the main campaign is over, it becomes one of those comfort food games you can just kind of pop on if you want to shut off your brain for a bit. And when a game can provide a good mix of intense gameplay and mindless, comfortable gameplay, all enhanced through RPG and collection systems, along with an epic, engaging story so that you're locked into it from hour 1 all the way to hour 70? Well, shucks, that sounds like one enjoyable game you got there. I can't recommend Age of Calamity to everyone, but if it just happens to click with you, you're in for a good time. And that is that. If you would be so kind, please head down to the comments and let me know what you thought about Age of Calamity. Did you get sucked into its feedback loop as I did? Or is this just not your thing? Or perhaps did its unexpected elements prevent you from enjoying it? Whatever the case, I hope your day is wonderful and doesn't turn into a cataclysm. Got you again. Why are there so many disaster synonyms that start with "ka"?